a stamp of approval that says, yes, your business is ethical. We're the fastest growing region outside of the US.
Welcome to the Second Renaissance, where we decode the rebirth of human creativity in a technology-driven world. In this second season, we explore how sustainability is elevating our human consciousness and catalyzing us to create within constraints. We decipher why now is the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity since the dawn of industrialization, and what leaders can do to harness the winds of change. I'm Sorman-Nilsson, global futurist, impact champion, and father, and your host for the Second Renaissance. Today on the Second Renaissance, I speak with Whitney Teluk. Whitney is a B Corp Consultant and the head of learning and development at the co-working space Hub Australia. Whitney is passionate about transforming communities and facilitating sustainable business. She's a firm believer in the power of using business as a force for good, and we discuss why the B Corp movement is gathering exponential momentum and why this transformation journey can be so powerful for cultures, business and society, and where you can get started on your own journey of enhancing the 3 Ps of people, planet and profit. Welcome to the Second Renaissance, Whitney.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to talk all things B Corp and impact and the role of entrepreneurship in making the world a better place. I'm curious, given your background, what attracted you about the B Corp movement, and maybe also give us a little bit of a definition of what B Corps are and what B Labs do as part of that little introduction and your big why.
Yeah, so I guess first off, B Lab is the not-for-profit that administers the B Corp certification. So it's a global network of not-for-profits. We've got, our Australia, New Zealand branch based here in Melbourne. So they administer the certification. So a B Corp is a business that has been certified to meet those highest verified standards in, the areas of social, environmental and economic impact. And I first came across the movement in 2015 when I moved to Melbourne. This was around the time that I also discovered co-working, and I became a member at Hub Australia. So I was a member here before I worked for the business. And it was also around the time when I was starting my own business. So I was thinking a lot about, setting up my own thing, how that was going to look. And then I found out about this whole B Corp thing, and it just really made sense to me. I just thought, that's awesome. Like, to have a stamp of approval that says, yes, your business is ethical, your business is responsible, you are, you're purpose-driven as well as profit-driven. I just thought that was a really, really cool idea, and it kind of just worked out really well. Like, I moved to Melbourne, I didn't know anyone, I discovered co-working, that helped build my community here in Melbourne, and I also started going to a lot of B Corp events, and I just met the most amazing business people that kind of were not necessarily looking to run businesses that were similar to mine or in the co-working industry, but they all had that same goal of using their business as a force for good. And that just made total sense to me. And I thought, well, if you're starting a business, in these times, you're kind of silly if you're not thinking about that, I think.
Yeah. And so were there any particular people that you met that were particular sort of inspirational guidelines for you as you kind of went like, oh yeah, I'm starting my own business? I mean, oftentimes there is a sort of that profit motive, and I think in business sometimes we even sometimes occasionally historically we might have even felt guilty about having a profit motive, but from what I'm hearing here is that you made the realization that profit and purpose actually can go hand in hand, and maybe they must go hand in hand into the future. Were there any people that you met who kind of just created that sort of eureka moment for you?
Well, definitely when I discovered Hub and got to meet the founder of Hub, Brad Krauskopf, who's our founder now, our CEO still now, I was super impressed with Hub and the community that he'd managed to build at the locations that Hub had at that time. And that's why I decided to actually come work for the company, because I just thought it was the best thing ever. And have been super impressed with how Hub has grown so rapidly, but also been able to maintain, those core values and maintain our B Corp status as we have grown, because it gets more and more challenging as you get bigger. So that was definitely one. And then the B Corp poster child for me is Patagonia. Learning about businesses like that and just being so impressed with the way in which they choose to operate. And then more locally, businesses like Dumbo Feather and Small Giants are, quite prominent in the B Corp movement, particularly here in Melbourne. So, yeah.
Cool. I mean, there's, obviously, businesses that have sort of used the idea of provenance marketing for a long time. And this could be, stamped USDA organic, or, Demeter, or, certified Angus beef. We kind of associate it with food in terms of how the supply chain looks like. And in some ways now, the supply chain is becoming that story that's winning the hearts and minds of today's and tomorrow's conscious consumer. Now we're increasingly seeing this B Corp stamp on businesses as well. And many might have thought, hey, the pandemic and the disruption and the sort of, flight back to sort of just pure survival modalities for human beings around the world might have sort of quashed this idea of, ethics and sustainability, etc. But I gather you guys have seen the opposite, that people are actually making even more conscious decisions, and the B Corp movement is sort of going exponential at the moment. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's definitely from what B Lab is, communicating to the community. They've seen a huge spike in businesses undertaking what's called the B Impact Assessment, which is the online tool that you complete to become a B Corp. And I think the B Corp movement in the Australia New Zealand region has definitely, we're the fastest growing region outside of the US, and I think a lot of people kind of had it as on their to-do list, like we want to become a B Corp, we want to start that process. And the pandemic actually gave them the opportunity and the downtime to start the assessment, because it can be a little bit intimidating to start, or, people will have it in the back of their mind, they'll put it off for a couple of years. So having this bizarre space that we didn't, a lot of people, things slowed down and didn't really know what to do with it, is actually a really useful time. So the B Impact Assessment, there's been a lot of people that are undertaking it at the moment. And I think people now they just have really high standards of the companies they want to work for, the businesses they want to interact with and do business with. And B Corp is a really great way to know that you are, engaging with a business that cares and that has been verified in those 5 impact areas. And it looks at the whole business. There's, of course, those certifications that you mentioned earlier are really great, but they're very specific. So you could be totally killing it in that one specific area of being fair trade certified, but that doesn't look at the governance of the business, or it doesn't look at the environmental impact of the business. So B Corp kind of covers a lot of ground. It's very rigorous. So I think that's why it's been such a popular thing that a lot of people have taken up.
Yeah. And what about the origins of B Labs? You mentioned Patagonia a minute ago, but where was this idea born? What's the sort of embryonic eureka moment that somebody, or maybe a collection of people, had to start this concept that then became the movement of B Corps?
So it was three guys in the US in 2006. I was going to say 2016. In 2006, who left their careers behind in business and decided to create an organisation that was dedicated to making it easier for mission-driven companies to protect and improve their positive impact over time. So I believe one of those three guys, what happened was they had a really great business that was manufacturing. It was a clothing label, and he sold it, and all of this great work that he'd put into it being, environmentally and socially responsible, kind of wasn't locked in anywhere. It wasn't when the business changed hands, the new owners could kind of do whatever they wanted. So they wanted to create something that meant that mission or that vision was protected over time. So that's how it started. The first 82 B Corps were certified in 2007. That was in the US, and then the first 40 B Corps in the Australia and New Zealand region were certified in 2012, and Hub was one of those first 40.
Yeah, cool. I mean, we hear about the idea of greenwashing and ethics washing and all this kind of stuff, and there's certainly investment vehicles and hedge funds, some of which just sort of make a couple of tweaks, and then all of a sudden they're an SRI fund or whatever. Is the assessment a way to kind of prevent that marketing spin from maybe pulling the wool over people's eyes and actually kind of going, hey, this is a third party that's independent, that's verified that everything that, a company or an investment vehicle or whatever it happens to be is actually what it claims to be?
Yeah, I can totally get how people are that, kind of tired of that idea of greenwashing and maybe even skeptical of certifications like this. And I mean, there's people are going to think that, and that's fine. But as someone that has completed the assessment because you have to recertify every 3 years, and you can very easily lose your certification if you don't meet the criteria. And as someone who has taken 2 different businesses through the certification several times, and then now consults with other businesses to take them through it as well, you can't get away with being a little bit dodgy in some areas and being a B Corp. It is very, very rigorous. The process, the initial certification process and then the recertification process is very in depth. You're assigned a analyst from B Lab, and they will poke holes in every aspect of your business to make sure that what you're saying in the assessment matches up with what you actually do. And of course, there's supporting documentation and interviewing processes that take place. And then they do audit. I think it's 10% of all B Corps get audited. It's every year. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there is an auditing process to ensure that those high standards are maintained and the credibility of the certification remains in place. Because like you said, it's important, and some people are skeptical, which is totally valid. So it's important that it is maintained in a really high way.
Yeah. I mean, there's a sort of an ethos here of almost, open kimono or, I remember, I grew up in a family business, small, quaint little family business in Stockholm, Sweden. And, one point in time, when there was a sort of a strategic rejuvenation of Mum's then 99-year-old business, she's the third generation owner operator. And we started engaging a few consultants, the family business network, to try and kind of really, get under the hood of the business. And her reaction was very, very sort of resisting. She's like, she actually described the whole experience at a later stage where she actually started willingly kind of engaging and sharing, but it was so culturally ingrained that you never talk to anybody about your business. You don't share numbers. You don't, share, what kind of arrangements you have with the unions or whatever it happens to be. And my mum described it, I remember, in a very kind of old school fashion, and apologies for the vivid imagery now, but she's like, I actually feel like I'm sitting in the gynecologist chair and somebody is examining my business in a very, very awkward, very, very too intimate fashion. And so you can understand that, somebody might have a resistance towards sharing all of that. Are you seeing just like, is it across the generations now that people are happy to be transparent about, their carbon emissions, what their employee arrangements are, who they bank with, their governance structures, all of which my mum would have described as, sitting in the gynecologist chair, or the male equivalent. Are you seeing that people kind of happy to be transparent in that way?
Such an interesting way to describe it. I'm so sorry that your mum felt that way. My gosh. I hope it turned out okay in the end. I think businesses that approach or even at the least are interested in becoming a B Corp, they won't get very far down the track without realizing they need to be able to be open and transparent with a lot of that stuff that is, probably for older generations maybe not traditionally spoken about. I mean, keeping in mind the assessment that you complete, you need to be extremely transparent in the assessment, and there's a disclosure questionnaire as well where you need to disclose any controversial industries that you're operating in, or anything that could be, counter to the idea of being a B Corp. But that doesn't all become like public information. It stays confidential within B Lab and with your standards analyst. You have to make your B Corp score publicly available, and you make, within that score, it's broken down into 5 impact areas. So governance, customers, community, workers, and environment. So you make your score within each of those sections available. But it's not like people can see your whole assessment. Okay, so they see the score that that you end up with. But so it's not. It's not quite as scary as what people think, but you do need to be, I guess you do need to be open. And in terms of pushback from that, with the businesses that I've worked with to get them certified, I haven't really ever experienced too much of that, especially when I explain, what I just explained. So yeah, maybe it is a generational thing. I'm not sure. But I think that the businesses that this movement attracts are businesses that kind of are more willing to be open about that, because they're doing great work. There's nothing to be, to hide or to be ashamed of.
The other thing here too is that you guys very much, position this rightfully that it's a journey, and nobody is perfect, and it is a development process, and you might score 40 or 50, the first year, and you might have to, change your banking provider, or, who you work with from a superannuation perspective, or you might have to, tweak your constitution in your organization to insert certain elements. So it is this sort of transformational journey where it's not necessarily, you're not saying how you have to rush through this and get it all done in a month.
Exactly. Yeah. Some people take, like for large enterprises, it can take them several years to they might complete their first pass of the B Impact assessment. You have to score a minimum of 80 points to be eligible for certification. Most businesses come out with a score around that 50 mark. That's very normal. So they'll go, okay, well, we need to make some changes. They go off, make those changes. B Lab helps with that. You can, an impact improvement report is generated from the assessment tool that kind of says, here's where you might be lacking. Here's some things that you could implement short term and then long term. Then they'll come back, do their second pass. If their score's at 80, they can, 80 or above, they can submit. And then, of course, you have to recertify every 3 years. So with Hub Australia, the recent recertification that we did, our business had changed so much in that 3 years. So there was lots of new stuff that we had implemented that contributed to our score. But there was also lots of other things that, that we still need to keep working on. So that's why there is that recertification model, because it's not like you get the stamp of approval and you've arrived, you're a great business and that's the end. Like, like there's an incentive to continue to improve in each of those areas for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned before that, there's certain customers, you might be working with who would probably maybe drag down your score. I remember hearing an interview with Elon Musk, and we always associate Tesla as this super innovative company doing great things for the environment and, helping shift, the world, not just automotively, but our whole thinking towards renewable and solar, etc. And he got very criticized for being on the advisory committee for Donald Trump and, advising on the future and energy, etc. And people were kind of going, okay, now you're in Donald Trump's tent. What does this say about you? And he sort of said, people can think what they want about the fact that I was advising Donald Trump, but at least the words have been spoken. In other words, he said he needed to be in the tent to actually make certain recommendations for the future of the United States when they were thinking about energy and thinking about transport grids, etc. What's your view on that? I mean, if an organization works with, the coal industry or, if they're working with tobacco, but they're trying to influence those companies. I mean, even, some of the largest banks in Australia say, hey, we need to keep funding some of these miners so that they can transition away from, bringing dead dinosaurs out of the ground into renewables, but we need to fund that transition. Have you got any thoughts on what makes sense? Is it the kind of ethos of at least the words have been spoken, or should you just sort of cut those customers from your life?
Yeah, it's really hard. And
I'm not expecting the perfect answer here, right? But I'm just curious in your thoughts.
I mean, the Elon Musk and Trump example is interesting because, I mean, if I think about it, I'm like, well, Elon Musk is probably a good person to be in Trump's ear. Like, who else was it going to be? What was the alternative? It was probably not someone as progressive or knowledgeable in these areas as Elon Musk. I don't know. So with that example, I'm like, I think that's good, and in terms of, businesses working with other businesses that maybe are lagging behind or actually doing, more damage than good, those industries need to be brought along. Like they need to change because it's very clear that if they don't, it's not going to be great. So I think they need to be brought along the journey. That is very difficult, of course, because there's a lot of competing interests and, don't want to be too cynical, but, it is difficult when there is so much power and money involved. But yeah, I think those businesses need to be kicked up the butt as well. So, and if movements like this can kind of increase the pressure on them, then I think that's great.
I mean, from a banking and financing perspective, what we are seeing around the world too is that, there are now increasingly agreements between financiers and the people trying to finance and get funding for particular initiatives where they actually have ESG targets. And, the rates on loans will go up unless, both parties kind of meet certain targets, etc. So certainly, even financiers like the banks can actually put a bit of pressure on some of these, laggard industries to actually get their game into gear as well. So you do see that pressures are kind of arriving in a multitude of ways. Now I'm curious, what do you think makes, business the vehicle for really driving environmental, social governance, sustainability? Like, isn't this just something that, government and, philanthropists and charities should be driving? Why business?
Well, I would say because business employs the most people and the public and private sector generates the most revenue. So that's where the majority of the people power and the economic power actually lies. And in Australia, unfortunately, we've generally had governments that have lagged behind the business sector in terms of best practice or, progressive movements in social, economic, and environmental space. So it has to be business, because otherwise, if we hung around waiting for government to lead the way in those areas, then we'd be even further behind than what we are in some of these areas. So that's kind of where, in terms of government, that's sort of what I think. And then in terms of charity, of course, they do, the not-for-profit and charity sector do a lot of incredible work. That's very important. But again, it's a smaller sector than the business sector. So it needs to be both.
So what are some heartening examples that you've seen in your role in the ecosystem that is, B Corp's, B Lab's hub, of either small businesses pivoting, changing their business models and as a result becoming maybe both more purpose-led but also more profitable, either on the sort of, corporate big international stage or even in the entrepreneurial communities that you've worked with, where you're really seeing, business stepping up and making a real change?
I can probably speak to, our experience at Hub, with the things that we do in this area. So we're B Corp certified, we're carbon neutral certified. There's lots of different really great social and environmental impact initiatives that we run to either, reduce the negative impact and increase positive impact. And we find that a lot of people want to do business with us because we care and we do that stuff. Of course, the core business, that we offer of being a flexible workspace, that needs to be 5-star, that needs to be great, because you can't just rely on the feel-good factor, and you need to be providing a great product or service. So we need to make sure that is maintained. But people, they want to do business with other businesses that they're aligned with. So I think the consumer-driven, behaviours are what people pay attention to, because that's why we're all here. We all need customers, and if we can have customers that are aligned with us because of the great work that we're doing, then that's like a total bonus, and everyone feels great, and we get to make a difference, and we get to make sure that we're delivering on those promises.
Yeah, I was speaking at the Dyson Global Conference just the other night, and one of the key points that I made, and it was the audience was largely suppliers to Dyson. Of course, Dyson's one of the most innovative companies in the world, and really also really moving the needle in terms of what they're expecting from a sustainability perspective from their suppliers. And the whole ecosystem kind of needs to shift to ensure that every part of the supply chain is now sustainable and high performing on ESG factors. Well, my key point was that now the supply chain is the story. In other words, people have known about marketing, they've known about farm to table, farm to fork, producer to consumer, but now really the conscious consumer who is on the rise now demands to know through the supply chain. Everything needs to be digitally traceable. And so it strikes me that being part of a B Corp ecosystem of suppliers might be almost like a, ethical shortcut of ensuring that, everything actually is squeaky clean, so that you can tell that story of accountability. And I think brand accountability today is really as important to sales as marketing once was. Have you got any thoughts or reflections on that?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point to make, and it's a good way to think about it as like a shortcut. I like that, because like I said, it's obviously not everyone goes through that process of becoming a B Corp, but as the person who has done that, you can be rest assured that those businesses have done the work to get that certification. So it really is a shortcut. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't really have much else to add. I think it's a really great point, and it makes sense. And we now know that that customers, are going to trust a business that has a social or environmental mission at its core. They're going to trust them more. They're going to want to work for them more. They're going to want to, be on their team, and that's beneficial for that business. And if they're doing great work, then that's beneficial for the area of work that they're contributing to.
So I'm just thinking, if an organisation is sitting around and they've scored 60 points or 75 points, and they're just underneath the sort of certification standards, what is and I know this is going to be individual to every organisation, every industry, etc. But what are some ways in which people can kind of grab some low-hanging fruit and get a few points to help them along on their journey? What are some easy wins in this space?
Things like measuring your carbon footprint. So that can sound more complicated than what it is, but the B Lab provides a really great. It's literally just a spreadsheet to measure this stuff. So that's one that any business can do, can start doing straight away. And then there's other things. I mean, I work in HR as well, so there's a lot of really great, human resources policies that can be implemented that will bump up your score quite well. So having a really great parental leave policy, all of the kind of key policies that you would have in place, equal opportunity, bullying and harassment, all that kind of stuff. Of course, you would need that. But doing things like offering professional development leave or a professional development fund to your staff can be really useful. A wellness fund, having a focus on wellness for your people is a really, really great one as well. What else? What are the other kind of low-hanging fruits?
Change your bank.
Yeah, change your bank. There's some really great banks now that are B Corp certified in Australia. We have a couple of them now, which is awesome.
So I'm thinking Bank Australia and Beyond Bank being two of those.
Bank Australia, Beyond Bank. I swear there's another one, but I'm forgetting it. I can't remember. But yeah, there's options. Another good one is having a procurement policy, so ensuring that you are procuring your goods and services from either, just having a policy in place where you preference, B Corps or women-led businesses, Indigenous-led businesses, local businesses, that kind of thing. So having those policies in place to ensure that you're holding yourself accountable for those kinds of things, particularly procurement, because all businesses need to buy goods and services to run their business. So if you are buying those goods and services from other great businesses, then that's something that you are rewarded for in the B Impact. As soon as you find out about this, you should be onto it. But also, I think, as I said before, people have really high standards, particularly employees, Gen Z and millennials. At Hub, the majority of our business are millennials, and there's been, a dime a dozen studies around what millennials and Gen Z expect at a workplace now, and they're just not going to tolerate working for a shitty company that just exists to make money. Like, they're just not going to. So I think it's actually really important for attracting and retaining great talent, and then of course having those customers that are aligned with you. Like I said, we know that customers are going to trust a business that has an environmental or social mission at its core, and that's going to be beneficial economically for that business. And in terms of the benefits, it's just a really great way to be able to easily communicate your commitment to this stuff, and then also a great way as well to hold yourself accountable internally and externally for the work that you're doing.
Sure, you come across this, right? Because you've got to do lots of stakeholder, management and communicating and influencing. And I'm sure it's not always the case that everybody in a client organization that you work with is on board 100%. You've won hearts and minds from the beginning. That'd be lovely if it happens every time, right?
That would be great.
What are the sort of what are the skepticisms? What are the roadblocks? Like, what are they sort of culturally ingrained views that you come up against that you kind of have to get people beyond for them to truly buy into this vision?
I'd say the biggest one is, in terms of culturally ingrained views, is if we're like purpose has to come at the cost of profit. That's probably the oldest and most ingrained one, but it is definitely changing. So probably that one, and then also, again, going back to the cynicism around greenwashing, like, why would we do this? Can't we just be a good business? Why do we need like someone else to say that we're being good? Which is fair enough. It's a choice. It's a choice to do something like this. So, I'd say that it is probably the main one though. The profit over purpose, argument, which I just think is, doesn't need to be an argument anymore.
What do you say to those two skepticisms or those, resistant views?
Well, I mean, it's about getting back to the reasons why they would want to actually engage in something like this, because nobody has to. No one's forced to. So if they've come to me, or if they're curious about the movement, then there's clearly a reason or something that has spiked their interest. So going back to that. But again, what I said before about people wanting to work for businesses that are, using business as a force for good, and wanting to buy from businesses that use business as a force for good. Like, you need great people to run your business, and you need customers. So if you want to stand out and you want to differentiate yourself from competitors, this is a really great way to be able to do that. That's genuine, and that matters.
Probably before regulation forces you to, because at some stage government will get their act together. And,
hopefully,
and start forcing some of these changes as well. So
and then these businesses, these businesses will be the ones that are like at the forefront of that and ready to go. So yeah.
Or I mean, even got ahead of the curve, right? And I think there's merit in saying that, hey, we changed this before government forced us to. It's just the same like, before FOFA or, the future of financial advice and all those reports came out, there were financial advisors who'd sort of gotten rid of commissions and had gone independent to act in the best interest of their clients before it became a law. And, those certainly had a, branding advantage and the sort of this, ethical, independent core to their brand DNA already. And I mean, now we're seeing that the academic studies are showing that when it comes to, cost of capital, it goes down for companies that are performing well on ESG factors. We know that operational performance is higher for organizations that are performing well on ESG factors. And we know that the share market performance over a period of time is also higher amongst those companies who are doing good on ESG criteria compared to their competition. So I'm kind of thinking when you present numbers and figures, do you sway some people and sort of say, hey, by being purpose led, you can also become more profitable like these organizations, or the likes of Larry Fink at BlackRock will not fund you if you're not performing well on ESG factors?
Yeah, I mean, that's super compelling, and I don't have a problem with people wanting to make more money. Like, if it means that they are taking this up because they do want their business to be used as a force for good, and as a result they're going to be more profitable, then great. That's great for them, and that works because they're going to be involved anyway.
I think there's a feeling that I've got around this, which is almost this sort of scarcity mindset versus this abundance mindset. Like, scarcity mindset says, it's either profit or it's purpose. It's a trade-off, and the pie is only so big. Whereas an abundance mindset might say, hey, we're going to drive both purpose and profit at the same time and grow the pie. Have you got a view on that? Or some people call it, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Do you come across that sort of dichotomy in the people you talk to, that some people just like, they get it, versus other people kind of ingrained and maybe have that sort of scarcity mindset that it's, yes, treating our staff is going to cost us a lot more, so we'll take away from the bottom line?
I mean, to be honest, I don't really come across the first example. I guess by the time I'm talking to a business that wants to become B Corp, they've overcome that themselves. And Hub is, definitely not a business like that. And, the other young people that I'm friends with that run businesses, like, I don't know, I haven't met many young people that think that way now. So to be honest, I haven't come across that. So lucky for me. But if I do, it would be a fun conversation for sure.
You've got more abundant thinking friends that maybe than some of the people we come across in business. Although I do think that this is a moment of enlightenment and a sort of an elevation of human consciousness around business. And certainly with the rise of the conscious consumer, which shows that 55% of global consumers now think it's really important to be able to view digital traceability and transparency of the whole supply chain. I think there's a real sort of rallying moment around how do we capture this conscious consumer right now. And I think that's heartening in terms of where business is moving at the moment. I mean, if you put your sort of astrologer cap on, or maybe even your futurist cap on for a moment, if everything goes well, if you and Hub and B Labs and the B Corp movement does really well, and you get this groundswell energy, and businesses around the world are adopting the B Corp certification, become certified, and start making a massive impact. I mean, what's your sort of utopia for the year 2030? How will business look different from today?
Well, at the moment there's 4,000 B Corps globally in 70 different countries, 150 different industries, and there's almost 100,000 businesses currently undertaking or using the B Impact Assessment to manage their impact. So that's a lot of businesses and they would, I don't know the numbers, but they would be employing, a lot of people. So I think it would be really cool in 2030 if the B Corp movement became more and more well known, and it became a big deciding factor in people deciding who they want to go work for and who they want to buy from. And if the B Corp movement could influence government, like we were talking about before, having them catch up and start to regulate some of this stuff as well, so that it becomes more and more normal. And I mean, for Hub, by 2030, gosh, I don't know how many locations we're going to have. We have 11 at the moment, and we have 100 staff and 4,000 members. So that's a pretty decent sized community. And over the next couple of years, we're going to be at least, well, maybe not a couple of years, but over the next little while, we're going to be doubling in size, and that's very, very exciting to me to have that many team members and members in our community. Our customers are our members. That's very exciting for all of those people to be bought into something like this that really matters, and to be working from a space that they've chosen, for a number of reasons, but often it is because of the impact work that we do. I think that's really exciting.
And what are your personal drivers, or how does this align with your own personal mission or your own personal motivations? Like what is it that drives you in being a sort of a steward for businesses that are going on this transformational journey?
I think for me, kind of like I said before, when I first moved to Melbourne and discovered what this thing, a B Corp, was, I just was super inspired and thought it made sense. And I thought, imagine if all businesses chose to operate in this highly ethical, highly responsible manner. That would be really cool. A lot of the issues that we face might get solved, and a lot of the damage that is done by irresponsible businesses will get cleaned up. And so that's kind of the bigger picture. And then I guess at at an individual level for people, I really want people to love what they do every day and be going to work somewhere or be running a business that they love, because we spend so much time, at work or working on the projects that are important to us, and it may as well be something really impactful and meaningful. And I guess the B Corp movement kind of lined up with my personal commitment because it was a framework for that to be possible, I guess. So yeah, that's sort of my thing. I just really want workplaces to be as inclusive and accessible for all people as possible, and for people to really love what they do, coming into work, enjoying being with people, working on stuff that really matters to them that they can be proud of. I just think that's what's really important.
Had you ever come across businesses or worked in an environment that was the total opposite of what you think, the B Corp movement is all about, or anything that you think, hey, that actually pushed me in the direction because I never want to work in a place like that again, or even if it was, friends or family, and any personal experiences like that?
I've been pretty lucky. I've worked at Hub for 5 years now, and before that, I was running my own business and working casually. So yeah, I haven't had the experience of working in a really not great environment, and I certainly don't intend to do that because I've got options. And yeah, so I don't really have a burn story where I was never going back to that. And I just want people to, I've always sort of wanted people to, do what they love and do it really well and do it as much as possible.
Where does that come from? Going back to childhood, thinking about, everyone's got their own sort of unique gifts or doing what they love. Where does that come from? Because not everyone is a believer in the fact that you can do, purpose-driven work, or that you can find this sort of what the Okinawans call ikigai, which is, doing what you are passionate about, what you love, what you're good at, that you can make some money from, but also, that makes a difference to the world. Where did that sort of belief come from, or is this just something that you've adopted over the years?
I would definitely say for sure my parents instilled that. I'm one of four, and I can remember from a very young age, particularly my mum just saying, just figure out what it is that you care about and what you love. And she would say that, and then my dad would say, and then figure out how to make money out of that thing. So that was kind of, I guess I sort of grew up with the belief that I could do something that was important to me, and have that be, my livelihood. And I also grew up seeing my parents run businesses together. So I grew up at a cattle station, but then so my parents ran that business together, and then they kind of ran several other businesses in the time that I was at home. So yeah, I guess that's sort of what showed me that if you want to see something happen, you can have a go at making it happen yourself, or you can go find somewhere to work for that is doing work in that area that you care about. But yeah, definitely down to my amazing parents.
Yeah, cool. And what do they think about the B Corp movement? Is it something that they're starting to think about in terms of their own businesses, or are you still having those conversations around the dinner table?
Yeah, well, my mum's a photographer, so she every now and then she's like, oh, that would be cool, maybe I could be a B Corp photographer. And I'm like, yes, Mum, come on, get onto it. So for whatever reason or another, she hasn't gotten to that yet. So yeah, and then my dad works in agricultural kind of carbon capture industry. So probably not doing a very good job at explaining it, but yeah, definitely working in a really interesting space that's growing a lot in Australia. So his business, they're not a B Corp, but I know that it is something that they have been considering. So yeah,
and already sequestering carbon, which is a great start. So
yes, exactly.
Don't worry, I have not yet convinced my parents either yet of the futurism journey.
Yeah,
and,
does your mum still run
digital
that business?
transformation. Well, sadly, after 104 years in business, at the fairly early stages of the pandemic, they filed for bankruptcy, and
Man,
it was
that's devastating.
huge blow. But I think it's like, and I speak, to my clients about this, it's almost become a bit of a warning flag. And while it's my sort of biggest shame as a futurist that I failed to really convince my parents of the merits of, digitally diversifying and, again, becoming B Corp certified and adopting ESG into the cultural ethos of the organization, the fabric of her little menswear store. I think it's almost like a warning light or a warning flag for other businesses that, pandemics happen, huge digital disruptions happen. And if you're not attuned to the future signal, sooner or later, you'll either have to sort of gamble the farm, which is very, very risky. Or in my mum's case, they just could not trade anymore because they were so analog, so physical, and they just hadn't sadly done the things that we had scenario planned with them, and kind of a case of culture eating strategy for breakfast.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that was inevitable for them, and it probably just sped it up, the pandemic. But I mean, 104 years, that's a pretty good run.
It's a very good innings, and on the upside, from a social perspective, it's a kind of a positive because no longer do they need to work 7 days a week and in their early 70s, and they actually have time now to spend with grandkids, and they have grandkids both in Sweden and here in Australia, and they actually get to spend time face to face or via FaceTime to FaceTime. So there's always a silver lining to everything, and I mean my mission, and as a futurist, I want to see businesses transform to become sustainable, to become ethical. And I don't want anyone else to have to go through that story of, after 104 years, kind of unnecessarily, sadly, see 104 years worth of history, Stockholm's oldest, family-owned menswear store go the way of the dinosaurs because they just didn't, innovate, and they didn't make these critical decisions about their futures. So there's a little backstory for you. Cool. So if people want to find out a little bit more about how they can avoid that fate and become B Corp certified, where can they find out more about Hub, about Whitney Teluk, and how do you guys help people get started on this journey?
Yeah, so I mean, you can just jump on hubaustralia.com. It's got all the info about our business there. And then, of course, we've got our impact and sustainability page, and that's where we talk about, the fact that we are a B Corp, and then also the service that we offer to, help speed up that process of becoming a B Corp. So yeah, that's how you can find out about us. And then also, if you want to know more about the B Corp movement, you can jump on the B Lab Australia New Zealand website, and there's lots of information there about the B Impact Assessment, what it kind of, what it covers, what it takes to become a B Corp. So that's a really good place to start. And start ASAP. I'm thinking about it. Just get onto it because it can take a little while. It is a bit of a commitment, a time commitment. You need to put some resources into it. It may not cost you that much money, but of course there is the time cost. So yeah, get onto it sooner rather than later.
Fantastic. And I should just say that our business Think is on the journey, and we've received some great coaching and feedback through the workshops with Whitney and the team. Partly through my role as the impact champion at the Entrepreneurs Organization as well. So I can really recommend these guys. Tune in and make sure that you start on that journey towards becoming B Corp certified. Thank you very much for being on the second Renaissance and teaching us a little bit about how human creativity can flourish in a technology-driven age. And I think the story about your parents, about your mum saying, hey, figure out your purpose and your passion first of all, and then your dad coming in and going, hey, and also figure out the profitability or how to make money from it, sort of beautifully encapsulates that they're very much B Corp at the core. And nice to hear that you grew up in such an enlightened setting as well.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much for having me, Anders. It's been awesome to chat with you.
On the next episode of The Second Renaissance, we speak with Sarah Wilson, author, minimalist, and philanthropist. Sarah is a New York Times and #1 Amazon best-selling author, founder of iQuitSugar.com, and a former editor of Australian Cosmopolitan magazine. She campaigns against consumerist waste, and her latest book is This One Wild and Precious Life, which is my most recent holiday read. A book about connecting to what is important and designing a better future and life for ourselves and the planet. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show in your podcatcher, and I'd be super grateful if you leave a review. For more information about the Second Renaissance and our work on sustainable innovation, please visit my website, www.sorman-nilsson.com. We would appreciate if you can take a moment to share the podcast with a friend or a colleague and help build the movement. We hope that what we learn together on the Second Renaissance can help us all build a sustainable future for ourselves and our children. See you in the near future.